Hey guys, it's ExandShadow here with a ramble because I feel like rambling. Yep, it's one of those type of days. Anyway, I'm sure that if you have been at all involved with the internet over the past couple of months, you probably remember Operation Rainfall. And if you don't remember Operation Rainfall or you just missed it entirely, I'll give you a little bit of a brief rundown. Anyway, Operation Rainfall was a movement about, was it a year ago now? It was a while ago, where a bunch of people got together to try to get Nintendo to localize three Wii games over into the North American regions. Those three games were Xenoblade Chronicles, Pandora's Tower, and The Last Story. Now, two of those games, Xenoblade and Last Story, did actually make it over here, which is considered quite an achievement. Pandora's Tower didn't, but from what I saw of the game, it didn't really look all that interesting anyway, so, you know what, I'll take what I can get. Anyway, Xenoblade came out about a week ago now, and I've just finished playing it. Last night, actually. I sort of gave myself a day to have it sort of sink in, and I really liked it. It's not a perfect game, and I mean, I didn't expect it to be a perfect game. It's definitely got that sort of rough around the edges feeling, but overall, it was something that I really enjoyed playing. Actually, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. And it just turned out being really, it was a very solid, enjoyable experience, and I hope that you guys should pick it up, especially since having The Last Story sell well will teach Nintendo to just to localize things and not hold off on it so long. I'm pretty sure this game came out in either early 2011 or late 2010, so yeah, we're getting it a lot later than Japan did. Anyway, this game is kind of an action RPG type thing. I mean, it's not an RPG in your traditional turn-based menu combat sense, but it's got a lot of the same sort of tropes that permeate a lot of RPGs. You know, magic, swords, some story things. You know, so it fits right in the RPG genre, sort of thematically, even if the gameplay is very different. Anyway, I guess I should start with the story first. You play as a young man named Zale, and he is part of a band of mercenaries, cliche number one, who want to become knights because being a mercenary kind of sucks. So they go to this island called Lazarus Island, and they work under Count Argonon, who is ambiguously evil. Oh yeah, note, a person you're working for being ambiguously evil, cliche number two. And while we're there, Zale falls in love with the noblewoman there, cliche number three, and then they just basically have all sorts of hijinks and stuff ensues while the plot gets progressively thicker. When in general, the plot itself is kinda generic. I mean, there were a few plot twists that I didn't see coming, but overall, the story itself is kinda just there. But the characterization and world building in this game is very, very, very good. And I think a lot of people have a difficult time differentiating between those things. Like, the plot of, let's just say, Paper Mario 1 isn't anything special. You know, Peach got kidnapped, you gotta go save her. But the world building's really good because all of the characters in the world are well written and fleshed out. You know, everything feels believable. You know, it's a well-designed area, stuff like that. The Last Story, while it has a pretty standard plot, the world building and characterization is top-notch. I mean, your party members are well written, well voiced, which is really good. The voice acting's great. Well written, well voiced, very funny actually. This game got me to laugh quite a few times, and any game that gets me to laugh automatically is in my good books. The surroundings are also very fleshed out. Due to the way the game's designed, you spend a lot of time in the same areas, but those areas grow and evolve as the game progresses, and as you go through the game, you get more attached to them, so there's a very focused game hub that's really well designed. It's just a very fleshed out world that I had a lot of fun exploring. When we get into the nitty-gritty of the combat and the dungeons, gameplay is very linear. Basically, you start at the beginning of a dungeon, you go through one straight shot to the end with several combat encounters on the way. If it reminded me of anything, it actually the combat section of this game actually remind me a lot of a D&D campaign, if you've ever played that. If you haven't, in D&D, your DM will usually, when they make a dungeon, will usually have a whole bunch of rooms with different combat scenarios in there. And once you beat that combat scenario, you'll gather all the treasure and head to the next combat scenario, with maybe a few puzzles littered in between in some sections of towns. The last story felt very much like a D&D game to me, even though the combat systems are very different. But the general sense that I got while playing felt very similar to a D&D campaign, which is actually kind of odd because it's nice to have that feeling of playing a D&D game without having to get 8 people together and buying strenuous amounts of snacks and knowing where all your dice is and all that stuff. But yeah, while the gameplay might be a little bit too linear for some people's taste, I really didn't mind it. To be honest, I don't mind if a game's linear as long as it's interesting while it's being linear. And there's enough freedom that you really don't mind anyway, because there's plenty of optional quests for you to do, stuff to find, etc., etc. So I didn't mind the linearity at all. I actually kind of enjoyed it, because if there's one thing I don't like in a non-linear game, it's when I'm wasting my time, you know, when the game's just sort of stringing me along and not doing anything. But I really liked the game design. Combat is interesting because in combat, if I didn't say this before, you play in real time. And when you want to fight an enemy, you just sort of walk up to them, and then Zale will just auto-hit the enemies with your sword. So there's not really a whole lot of strategy when it comes to just beating up enemies. But as you play through the game, you and your companions will get more and more skills. So early on in the game, you get the ability to draw all of the enemies to your attention. So instead of the enemies picking off your mages, everybody will be sort of focused on you. So if people are like beating up your healer or your firecaster, you can have them all the enemies focus on you, so your casters can do stuff without getting interrupted mid-cast. You also get the ability to like hide and then do sneak attacks and run up on walls and drop kick people, and then eventually you get the ability to command all of your party members independently. So you say to one mage, you focus on healing, you cast fire magic, you retreat and hide, stuff like that. And there's also a lot of different strategic stuff that goes into the playing. So even though it's a very fast-paced, action-oriented RPG, there's lots of strategy involved too, and a lot more strategy than just like cast fire on ice type monsters. You know, there's a lot of strategy to the environments, where you want to stand, whether or not to use your gathering ability, stuff like that. So it's just, combat is a ton of fun, not only because it's fast-paced, but also because it's incredibly rewarding for your decisions. If you make good decisions, battles will go by really quickly, and if you make bad decisions, you're probably gonna get your ass kicked. The game isn't too hard overall. There was only a few bosses towards the end that gave me a little trouble. But it's definitely not a cakewalk. You do have to try, so I do like that. Graphically, it's a little bit rough, and this is more than just... It's trying way too hard to be an HD game, even though it's stuck on the Wii. And don't get me wrong, the game still looks really great. It's got excellent art design. But it's just one of those games that I think would have worked better on an HD console. Because, you know, there's little things that bug you all over the place. The frame rate's kind of choppy. You know, there's clipping because armor and weapons change depending on what you have equipped. And whenever that happens, there's tons of clipping to be found. There's just some low-res stuff littered about. You know, it's a Wii game, and it looks very much like a Wii game. And while it's a very good-looking Wii game, you know, this art design, I would have loved to see this on, say, like, the Wii U, or maybe even just a PC release. It would have looked 10 times better if they were allowed to have the resolution that they wanted to have, I find. Musically, well, this game was composed by Nobuo Uematsu, who did most of the Final Fantasy games. And while the score is good overall, there's not really a whole lot of memorable tracks until the very end of the game. I mean, throughout most of the game, throughout most of the dungeons, it's silence until you get into an encounter, and then there's like three or so encounter themes that sort of cycle through depending on how serious the fight is. And I mean, there's a few special tracks, like the theme for the arena is awesome, but it isn't until the end of the game where bad guys start getting their own unique boss themes that the music really shines. Like, there's one track called Invitation to Madness, which literally had me giddy with excitement the moment it started playing. It's just awesome. But overall, I think that there are just a few boss themes that I think they would have been better off sprinkling throughout the earlier parts. Like, there's one boss theme called Dance of Death, which is given to a relatively inconsequential mook at the very end of the game. So I think that would have been better off sprinkled about as a boss theme throughout the dungeons. And I mean, it didn't have to be the only boss theme, but if they played it through some of the more interesting bosses, like maybe the vampire boss, it would have worked well. I think it would have been nice. But just overall, The Last Story was a very, very fun game to play, and I really enjoyed playing it. As a matter of fact, it makes me very happy that Operation Rainfall did end up being a thing, no matter how annoying I thought the group was at first. But Last Story was really good, and I recommend that everybody take a look at it. It's not a perfect game, and it's not a life-changing game, but it's 20 hours of good, solid fun, and I think you'll enjoy it. Anyway, I'm ExandShadow, and I'll see you guys later.